Hey guys, welcome to Public Speaking Power, the show where we teach you guys how to become great public speakers and just become more confident speakers in general. Today I have with me Andrew Davis from popanimecomics.com. He is a 15-time panelist. He knows how to command a room. And so we're going to be talking about the conventions that he attends, the panels that he runs, how to command a room, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, hey Andrew, thanks for coming on today.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
Okay, so for those who don't know you, which is probably going to be most of my audience, do you want to quickly just explain who you are, what you do, and what are these panels that you've been running at conventions?
So I am a panelist, and what I typically do is that I go to a bunch of anime cons, comic cons, pop culture events, and they have a bunch of panels for fans. And so I go and I pick a topic, typically usually in Japanese animation, whether I cover a director or I cover a particular genre, and I go and I present a panel, and I typically have anywhere between 40 to 60 people in my room, and I speak, I insert video clips, and we just cover a basis of information that occurs throughout my hour. And it's very fan engaging, and a bunch of other stuff occurs.
Okay, so are these your fans, or are these fans of like particular comics or particular shows?
At this point, I have some people that I've been to a few cons and they reoccur because they recognize my name. But for the most part, these are just people who just come and like what I talk about and like the direction I'm going in and like whatever I'm doing with a panel. So to talk about my panel, which will give a good example, is that I'm a big Japanese animation fan, in particular, the godfather of anime, Osamu Tezuka. So there's a lot of fans out there who really enjoy Tezuka. And so they come really for that information. And I've done a very good job of presenting it, and I present it in a fun way.
So are you an expert on this particular person and the anime they create?
I wouldn't go as far to call myself an expert. I'm actually learning how to be an expert. There are other people who I would qualify as an expert. I'm very new to this. I've done minimal research, and I'm really at the start of researching him. But I'm making and working my way towards becoming an expert in Tezuka, particular Golden Age animation in particular.
Okay, so let's talk about these panels, because you were saying before the panel consists of just you. I was under the impression that a panel was always like, 5 to 10 people sitting across a long table, and then I guess the audience or like reporters ask questions or they run through questions. What exactly is a panel in the situation that you're talking about? Because you're saying it's just you.
So my panels, there's two types of panels. There's Q&A panels, which is what usually consists of 5 people, and they're very fan interactive, and they're usually of people who are voiceover actors, and they're just fan engaging, and people ask them questions. What I do is I create a PowerPoint and a particular theme. So I was just in Anime Boss, and I did a sports panel, so I covered a bunch of sports anime. And so I go through information, and I'm up there, and then I use video clips, and I use visuals, and I speak, just giving people information, engaging with my audience. A lot of my panels are very interactive. So I'll ask the audience a question, and then we go from there, and I'm speaking, and we're all engaging together.
Okay, so let's go through, because I'm not familiar with the anime scene. So you said you're talking about sports anime. Like, what is that? And like, let's talk about like, what was the panel like? Like, what sort of topics did you cover about sports anime? What sort of questions did you ask the audience? Just, I think people might be getting lost because they don't understand the anime scene and how you would run something like this. So let's run through one and like teach me what you would cover.
So what I cover in my panel is that I'll pick a theme. So I compared modern sports anime to sports anime from 20 years ago, and I did a comparison in particular genres. So I covered baseball, a baseball anime from 20 years ago, and a baseball anime from about 6 months ago. And I covered a few others, such as basketball as well as tennis. And so what I do is that I compare and I contrast. And the way I go about making my panels, which might help, is that I created a PowerPoint. And so I basically created a contrast and compare chart side by side, and then I inserted a bunch of information. And so I had bullet points on one slide covering one anime, and then I had another slide doing the other anime, and then I showed video clips comparing the two, and then we spoke about that and just the differences, the similarities, what people felt about it, and I asked them what they feel about it, and then we have a miniature discussion, and then we move on to the next sports anime that I'm covering.
So what exactly is sports anime?
Sports anime is any anime that deals with a sport. So in America and in the world, there's a lot of sports, such as baseball. So sports anime qualifies as competition between two people or competition between teams, and it's just a genre. So anime in general it's just a medium. That's where people get confused, and I think some of the audience might be confused. So I'm going to clarify it. Anime is just a genre, such as TV. Film is very similar to anime, where you could have a bunch of different themes and genres in film.
Yes.
So sports anime is just a genre that depicts sports.
Okay. And anime, are we talking TV shows sort of things, cartoon TV shows?
Yes, but anime is Japanese cartoons.
Okay, cool. And so, all right, how did you get into like running these panels? How did you get started?
So when I was very young, I went to Comic-Con, and I love comics, I love anime, and I went to a bunch of panels. And then as I grew older, I went to more and more of them. And then one day I just said, I don't see any topic that I'm really enjoying. And so I said, I'm going to go do a panel. And the thought just occurred to me that I should go and do something that I don't see, that I would want to attend. And so I did one, and then...
So let me stop you there. So people run these conventions. I'm guessing you're not running the convention. How did you approach them, get approval to run a panel, get your own room, etc.? What was the process? You went from the idea, okay, I'm at these conventions. There's something that I wish was here but isn't. I'm going to do it myself. What was your next step? What convention did you choose? How did you approach them, etc.?
So a lot of these anime conventions, which is where I primarily do my panels, they have fan submissions. And so you just go on their website. If you have an idea, you go on their website, you fill out your name, you fill out your address, you fill out your phone number. They usually ask you, why is your panel great? And where are you going to cover, what public speaking you've done, what you haven't done. Have you ever been to this con before? And then from there, what they do is that they say, is it over 18 or is it under 18? Who's it suitable for? And they ask you for what you need. And then you write a description of what you would like it to be read in the booklet. And then about 2 months go by, maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, and they either tell you got it, you don't have it, or you're waitlisted.
Yeah.
And obviously the two are self-explanatory, but waitlisting means that you could either get it if somebody cancels, or they're unsure as they're still figuring out the schedule, or that it can mean a variety of things. I've actually been at a con where I was at the con, not in the book, and they called me about 6 hours before saying, hey, somebody canceled. Could you do your panel?
Yeah.
And so it can mean anything.
And so what's your hit rate? Do you mostly get accepted, and do they mostly accept you, or is it a lot of rejections and a few acceptances?
I submitted my first panel. I got perfectly. It was wonderful. I got accepted. No worries. And then I submitted again, and then they rejected one of mine, but they accepted another one. And then New York Comic-Con, not to bash them, but they're so huge that they don't really accept fan panels. And so just to go into this topic, depending on the con, some cons accept huge amount of fan panels. I was just in Anime Boston, which is the largest on the East Coast in the United States. It's about 27,000 people attend, and they have 120 panels minimum going on during the weekend. And so your success rate there is a lot higher than a place at New York Comic Con, which not to attack and not to deter anybody, but New York Comic Con is a very commercialized con. I love New York Comic Con. I'm not bashing it. It's a great place to go, but it's not a fan-oriented environment. It's not a very good environment for panelists like myself at this stage. It's very commercialized, and it's for guests and people in the industry, such as comic writers or voice actors.
Okay, and so how did you feel doing your first panel? Did you have experience running a panel or public speaking before? Were you really nervous? How did you go?
Oh, my first panel was a disaster. Just a piece of advice: your first panel will be rough. It's because there is nothing like doing a panel. You could attend a panel. I went to many panels before, but being on the opposite side, looking at the audience, is very different. The problem that I had was I was doing too much in my panel. I was trying to cover a too broad of a topic when I should have narrowed it down. And that was my problem. And I mean, I was terrified because there's nothing like doing a panel. It's a very different experience than anything else that anybody will do. But my big issue was that I was doing too much and I had way too much information to cover, which led me to doing my second panel, which was the revised edition.
Yeah. And did the second panel go a lot better? I'm guessing you cut down a lot on the content.
With my second panel, I actually cut down, I eliminated 75% of it. And what I did is that I took the 25% and I expanded it and I slowed it down. And it was much better because I took the time and we actually had an intellectual discussion, which is more my style now, where we had push and pull technique with my audience. And that's another thing.
What's push and pull technique?
Really what wound up happening is that I was asking more controversial questions to the audience. And so that got the audience more engaged. And then they would actually push against the panel. And then I set up the panel a little bit that it would push back against where they were going. I was kind of steering the ship purposely to push back. And I was setting things up and I was asking questions that I knew would get an answer. Okay. As well as I did plant somebody in my audience who did help a little bit, where they asked a question that helped as well. And that's the thing about audiences. Some panels, just in general, I've had panels where the audience has been massively engaged, and I've had audiences where they just want to sit there and listen. And so you got to read your audience and you got to placate to them, and you have to be able to adapt on the fly.
And so how do you generally, when you're running a panel, how do you interact with the audience? Is it like a microphone that goes around and individual people ask questions, or do you ask for raise of hands? How does the interaction tend to work?
It depends on the con. I had a room with one of my panels. I believe it was my fourth panel that I had 150 people in the room. And so there was really no engaging with my audience because there were just too many people. But then I had another panel where there were only 25 people in the room, and it was a classroom. And so there was no microphone, and it was kind of just very small and very interactive. And so it really depends on how many people are in the room. So if you have a small audience, so if I have 40 people, typically somebody will raise their hand and I'll be like, yes, you. And then, or I'll call them by their cosplay costume or some characteristic, and then they'll speak, and then we'll move on. And then if somebody has a point on that, and we'll really go that direction. And also, I typically do leave time. I leave about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes each panel to really engage in questions and have a more intimate discussion and give myself a little bit of a break from speaking.
And so tell us about this person that you planted in the audience. Sounds super stealth tactic.
It just was somebody that I knew. He was a friend, as well as my mom purposely asks questions because my parents have gone to a bunch of them because I started when I was 18. I mean, I'm 23 now. I've been doing this for about 5 years. And so really, you know, my mom would ask a question if she kind of saw it going a little off course of where I wanted to go, or my dad would ask a question. But then also my friend knows what I'm doing, and so he would ask a question. And so, I mean, it's nothing really that stealthy. It's just that certain people know what you're doing, and certain people just get it. And you can say, hey, if you see something not going in the right direction and you know where I want to go, just ask, because it'll save me and it'll give me a point to jump off of.
Yeah, so it's a way to like deflect the discussion. So if it's going in the wrong direction, in a direction you don't want to go, you can get someone to ask a question and point it back to where you originally intended.
Yeah, you know, it's a great technique for anybody who wants to do a panel. It's a great technique to bring somebody that you know to come, because they can ask a question and they could really help you. And you could give them the question to ask, which is even better, because that'll really help. I was actually at another panel, and the guy was a history professor, and he brought his 2 kids. And he was bouncing things off of his son, not even questions. They were just kind of having a debate in the panel, but it added to it, and it added to the entire history and the element of all of it. And you could also do stuff like that, where if you know somebody is an expert in a field and they're in your audience, you can bounce ideas off of them in the middle of your panel.
Yeah. And with this panelists, or like with running panels, is this a labor of love, like a hobby for you and something you enjoy doing? Or do you actually get paid in order to do this?
It's both. I love speaking. I love talking about a topic. I love being an expert in something. It was fun for me being, you know, I did a panel on Gundam, and Gundam fans typically are older because Gundam is a 35-year-old product at this point, if not older. And so I'm like 20 years old speaking to like 45-year-olds. Yeah. And it's very cool for a younger person to be teaching and to analyzing something and relaying that information to an older crowd. And also, I get a ticket compensated.
Yep.
So I get a free ticket to go to a con. So I do an hour or 2 hours worth of work, and then I get to enjoy the rest of my con for free. Okay. And also, I get perks sometimes where I can say, oh, I'm a panelist. And you could talk to people, as well as I hand out business cards and I network. And it's fun. I mean, it's a cool experience to be on the other side. I speak to other panelists, and you get a little bit more respect also from people who are running security and are volunteering at these cons. You get a little bit more respect from them because you are entertaining the audience and the fans, and they do appreciate it. And it's just nice to do something that you love and to get a free ticket. As well as I do put all this stuff on YouTube, and I'm hoping that it'll eventually lead down a road where I'm trying to brand myself and my website and my podcast.
Yeah. So you're growing your own personal brand through doing this. You get compensated with free tickets and things like that, and then you're growing your own personal brand as a name out there, which could eventually, you never know what it can lead to in the future. And so let's talk about commanding a room. You've said you've had rooms where it's been 25 people. You've had rooms where it's been 150 plus people. How do you go about reading the room? Like you talk about, you know, placating to the audience. How do you go about reading a room and then commanding it so that you can lead your talk in the right direction?
So typically what I love, and it doesn't always happen, but the best panels I've done is when they clear a room. Cons clear rooms, and what that means is that nobody could be in the room and that the panelist gets to go in first. And they get to set up without any eyes on them or anything like that. That is the absolute best because you get to grow with the room. When you walk into a room and you're setting up your stuff and you got 5 minutes to set it up, and then all these people are looking at you while setting up, that's very awkward. So the first thing that I love to do is that I always arrive early to all my rooms. And when I go to a con, My rule is that I find my room the first time I go there. I find it immediately, and I make sure that I look at the room while another panel is going on.
Okay.
That helps because you get an idea of what it looks like as an audience member. So that helps. And then I typically like to get there. I typically love when they clear a room. I get to set up, and then a bunch of people go. And then I've been in rooms where I set up in 10 minutes and I got 20 minutes. And what I'll do is I'll just speak to people in the audience. I've done that, and we spoke about everything but my panel. They know I'm the panelist. And I was just in Anime Boston at the end of March, and I arrived 20 minutes early. I set up in 5, and then I was just speaking to a bunch of audience members about Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
So now when I did my panel, they didn't know me as the guy standing at the front of the room. They knew me as the guy about Magic the Gathering.
Yep.
They knew me as the guy who plays with a Goblin deck. And so now we have a connection. And then there was a bunch of wrestlers in the room as well, wrestling fans, not wrestlers. And he had a Kevin Owens shirt on. I'm a big, WWE fan. And so we started talking about wrestling. And so now I just immediately connected with all these people, and about 70% of the room just based on our hobbies. And we were talking about a bunch of stuff. And so that helps, because then when you're doing it, they're more in tune to say, oh, he's into my hobby, but he's also into this other hobby. And you start connecting with people on personal levels, because hobbies are very personal to people.
Yeah. So
and then
are you building rapport with the audience? Are you talking about like you're just building rapport with them and talking about hobbies before you start the panel? Or are you talking about as well when you're doing the panel, you kind of calling out their hobbies or things like that? Like as you see someone's t-shirt and it's a wrestling t-shirt, or like you notice things about people, you're calling it out at the beginning of your introduction in the panel?
Typically, I build a lot of rapport with my audience before the panel. And then when I'm in the middle of my panel, I answer questions, as well as I'm also very energetic. Voice is everything. Standing up, walking around. I've done panels both sitting as well as standing. I find that when I stand, it's much better. It looks more professional, as well as walking around up in the front. Walking around up in the front is something that is also good, because then it helps to the audience sees you working, actually physically working, and that kind of helps because that puts you in command as you're the center and you're moving, and so their eyes have to move with you.
Yeah, I have heard that moving around is really great for helping to keep people's attention, because they need to like continually follow you with their eyes, but also it adjusts the volume like in their ears and where you're coming from, and it just kind of makes it more dynamic than if someone's just, sitting there or standing in the center of the room talking to you.
Also, what I do is I like to use PowerPoint. PowerPoint is the single most important tool in all my presentations. And what I do with my PowerPoints is that I keep it simple. PowerPoint is not I don't go off my PowerPoints. My PowerPoints, typically I put 5 points on a slide at most. And what I like to do with my PowerPoints is I use a lot of visuals. I use video clips. And it's something that I've recently done in my last 7 panels is I use a tremendous amount of video clips. And so I use a bunch of stuff from a bunch of anime. Yep. And whatever anime I'm talking about, I utilize that, because that's visuals, that's motion, that's sound.
Well, and that's what everyone's there for, right? Like they're there to learn about the anime that they love. So it makes sense when you're talking about it, or if you're talking about a certain point, to reinforce that point with a clip that you found, and then it's the anime they love anyway, so they're enjoying that, and they're seeing it in a new light. Like they're used to watching it, but now you're describing certain things about it, and they get to watch it from like a new angle almost.
And there's a great thing with videos, as well as with me moving around. My points are very simple, where somebody can read my points in about 5 seconds. I mean, not 5 seconds, but very shortly. But then I have 60 minutes. So my PowerPoints are like 15 slides with video clips in them. But I'm speaking. And so each point I expand on, and then what I do is that I then show my point with the video. Yep. And so I'm reinforcing it all but I'm also adding to it. And then I put in a variety of clips too, and I put in a diversity. So my Tezuka panel, which is one of my more famous ones, is that I'll put in one great piece of his work, and then I'll put in something that completely contradicts the style that he did.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that I like creating that juxtaposition, and it keeps the audience engaged. Because like, oh, I didn't see that Astro Boy looks this way and Blackjack looks that way. And you get this difference, and that also keeps the audience engaged, where you're giving them a whole picture rather than just a small component or a small viewpoint.
Yep.
And so I really like to do that. And I like to give a wide range, which I feel helps. As well as people wear costumes.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is in, or cosplay as it's in the community. So if somebody comes to my panel and they're the character, I'm going to tell the audience, oh, look at so-and-so. That's an awesome costume or cosplay. And I'll make a joke saying, you stay after because I want my photo with you. And then it gets funny and it's really enjoyable, as well as when people leave my panel. There was a great moment in Anime Boston during my sports panel, which was the first time I did that panel, where there's this character from One Piece named Frankie, and Frankie was leaving. And so I said in the middle of my speech, it just came to me, I said, did we make you sad, Frankie? Are you leaving because are you upset that I don't agree with this sports anime? And then I was drinking a Diet Coke, and Frankie from One Piece runs on soda. Yeah. And so I said, hey, we have soda, and I held up the bottle. And the audience just loved the joke.
It was just like the perfect inside joke for that moment.
It was perfect, and it was just off the tip of my tongue. It wasn't rehearsed, and it was a genuine joke. And the poor person didn't know how to respond. But
the poor person like trying to go to the toilet or something like that, and then you're just calling them out.
And like, I think all she could do was like just shake her head. But the audience thought it was great. The audience loved it. It was a great moment. And I do that in my panels, is that I'll have one-liners and I'll just hit something right off and it'll just be perfect.
Yeah.
And so that's really just being yourself. And if you're sarcastic, then be sarcastic, because that's what you're there for. You're there to be the show.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to be yourself and to be like your own person and not try and be someone else, because then like when you are yourself, you can pull out those one-liners or you can like do those jokes and it flows so naturally. Whereas if you're trying to be someone that you're not, then often, you know, if you try jokes and stuff like that, it will just fall flat because it's not natural.
And also, you know, when you do a panel, you can't care. I mean, you have to care, but you can't care at the same time. You have to say, hey, I'm here to have fun. This is supposed to be fun. You know, I don't have to be perfect. If I make a mistake, I'm just going to run with it. I'm going to roll with it. If something slips out of my mouth by accident, I've done it. Typically, your audience can be very forgiving. You know, if you have to say, look, I'm here to have fun, and it's going to come out the way it's going to come out, and you can't care if it's perfect, if it's not perfect, if something slips out of your mouth that shouldn't slip out, if you miss a fact. You have to say to yourself, everybody's here to have a good time, and I'm not getting paid $1 million to do this. This isn't a TV show. This is a live event, and I'm here because I want to be here, and this is what I want to do. And if I make a mistake, okay, I'll pick myself up, and I'll make sure the next slide's better, and I'll make sure that the next time I do a panel, it's better, because I make mistakes all the time, every time I do a new panel. So I repeat my panels. If you ever come and find me at an anime con, chances are I've done the panel before. I take it to different cons. I create maybe 2 new panels a year. And so I just did a new panel, and very rough panel, but I knew it was going to be rough. I knew there was going to be mistakes. I knew things were going to slip out of my mouth. It'll eventually be up on YouTube. You could all make jokes about it. That's your prerogative. But it's okay to make a mistake in this entire realm.
Yeah. And
Just keep going.
I think that's so important. And I think that's one of the things that school gets so wrong when they're teaching public speaking to people is they're like, we're going to study the best public speakers in the world. You're then going to go home, write a speech. You're going to get one chance to deliver it and be marked on how well you do. And if you make mistakes, then that's really bad. But I think the way you approach it, what you're saying, which is like, if you make mistakes, like that's part of doing it. You're putting yourself out there. You're trying, you're learning, you're going to make mistakes. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You learn from those mistakes and do better next time. And it happens with me all the time with the interviews I do or the shows I make or whatever. Like there's always mistakes or facts you get wrong and things like that. But I don't know. I always just say, well, hey, like I'm putting myself out there. I'm doing this with good intentions. I'm trying my best and I'll learn. And that's fine. If I make mistakes and people call me on it, I will learn from that. That's fine. It's not going to stop me doing what I do.
I mean, I can. I can tell people my YouTube because there's going to be two.
What is your YouTube?
My YouTube is Pop Anime Comics.
I'm going to go.
And there's going to be two panels that I just did. My last two ones. There's the sports anime panel that I just did. The compare and contrast between 3 sports anime, as well as my Tezuka panel. My Tezuka panel and my sports anime panel, I'm going to put them both up in the next 2 weeks or so, and I'm going to put them both up simultaneously. And for everybody who wants to get a really good glimpse of this, you can see the difference in something being refined, being adjusted, and a really good panel and a panel that's rough. And I've done 15, and you could see the difference between the two, and it's like night and day. And it's a great experience where I've learned more from my failures in my sports anime panel than I did from my Tezuka panel. But my Tezuka panel is so good at this point because I had the issues with my first panel about 4 years ago. And so, but my 4 year ago panel that I started, it was very similar to just the one I just did recently. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I was going to ask, I'm just on your YouTube channel now. I can see a few panels here that you've done. Do you ever watch your panels after you've done them? And do you kind of watch them trying to analyze yourself and see what did I do well? What could I have done better? Do you take that approach?
Honestly, I don't. I don't watch my stuff. I don't really have the time at the moment. I'm involved in a lot of other projects currently. I take a lot of feedback off the record at cons.
Yeah.
And I take that into consideration. And I actually have a friend who does a bunch of panels, and we've had discussions where he's been very critical of my work and I've been very critical of his. And it helps. It helps to find somebody in the community that is a fan panelist who loves it as much as you love it, and to just have a really off the record conversation. But I know at this point when I do a good job, you can see on the audience's face. Faces don't lie.
Yeah.
I was actually just watching something about this, and it was great. It was with Judge Judy of all people. She's right on this. People's faces change when they're lying. Some people, get a Nixon, mustache. Women sometimes, their mouths get really like salty and like dry. And this has been documented. It's not with all people, but there are certain traits that show when people are lying. And the same is true for when people are happy and pleased and satisfied and impressed. And you can tell as a human, you just reading body language, because you could see it in their eyes or in their smile a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when you see that face 6 times or 7 times or 40 times in a row, you're onto something.
Yeah. It's hard to explain as well how you know whether or not you're doing a good job, but you kind of just do when you're doing like a public speech, when you're doing a talk. You know when you say something and it misses, like when you tell a joke and it misses, or when you say something and you're like, oh, I didn't really quite explain that right. People aren't really understanding. And you know when you know, like when you told your Frankie joke and stuff, like when stuff's on point and you're doing really well. It's something I don't know how to explain it, but it just kind of happens to you as a speaker. You kind of know when you're doing well and you kind of know when you're not doing well. So I wanted to ask you, when you're having an experience like one of those panels where you're saying it was rough, what do you adjust mid-panel to try and improve the situation and to make it better? Or do you just kind of roll with it until the end and then just try and improve it for next time?
Well, my first panel, it was different because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
That's a proving ground. Your first panel is always going to be rough. There's nothing you can do. You just got to get through it. Just a word of advice: if you're doing your panel for the first time, tell the audience that it's your first time because they're going to be a lot nicer about it. My panel that I just did, that was very rough. I knew it was going to be rough. I knew where it was going to go. I had notes. I was just very nervous. It has to be refined, and I'm working on refining it because I'm going to keep it around for a while. But I knew it was going to be rough, so I just said, hey, I'm just going to go for it. Certain points were great. Certain points weren't. And I realized mid-panel what I needed. Everything was fine with the panel, except I needed one more clip to just eat up time.
Yeah.
And I realized mid-panel, after I passed the point, I realized that I had like 30 minutes left. Yeah, I realized that point. But I knew that when I introduce a new panel, I know it's going to be rough. I know, and I'm prepared for it at this point. And I even I told the audience in my Boston panel that, hey, you guys are going to experience this the first time. I built this panel for this place because I started in Anime Boston, and I made that, and I said, hey, I'm bringing this panel purposely back because this is my first time returning in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so this is, it's got a few kinks in it, but I'm just letting everybody in the audience know. So I knew at that point, but for people going out and creating panels and bringing new panels, prepare that it's going to be a little rough because the first time you do something, you might think a point is perfect, but the audience might not connect to it. Something might have changed in the anime community from the 2 weeks that you built the panel to the 2 weeks you're presenting it, and a joke might not be appropriate to throw into your panel.
Yeah.
So you have to always refine things, but you have to make a decision, and depending on how comfortable you feel, you either just keep going, because Winston Churchill said, if you're in the middle of hell, you keep going.
Yeah.
Or something to that degree, or you if you're comfortable enough, as I am at this stage in my career, I can adjust, but sometimes I just say, hey, I'm going to keep going because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think, like, I've had experience with that as well. When I used to work in pharmacy, we would do the same training over and over and over again. And each time you would take note of, okay, this point really resonated, this went well, people got confused in this part, or it didn't go so well. And then you adjust for the next time. And eventually, that's why I love when you can do a speech or a presentation or a panel a few times over and over, because it does get so much better. You get so much better at it, and it becomes a really good experience for the new audiences because you've learned so much from the past audiences. And so what does the future hold for you in terms of running these panels and things like that? Where can people find you, etc.?
My future is that I'm submitting a bunch of panels because I just got into grad school in Washington, D.C.
Congratulations.
And Washington, yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. But Washington, D.C. has an anime con called Anime USA. It's America, patriotic, go team go. But what happened, they have a con called Anime USA, and I'm going to be down there. So I just submitted one panel to them, and I'm going to be submitting 2 or 3 more. And so hopefully I'll be getting 2 or 3 of them. So I'm going to find out on August 15th. So we got a little while till I find out, but hopefully I'll be getting some stuff there. And then I just go all over, depending on where I am in the world. There's anime cons all over. I'm active on Twitter. I tweet out where I'm going to be. So my Twitter is @PopAnimeComics. I tweet out a lot of stuff there relating to just anime, comics, my panels, as well as my website. I'm actually in the middle of updating my past presentations as well as my future ones as I get them. So you can find me on my website at popanimecomics.com. And for the future, I mean, I'm podcasting a lot right now, and I employ a lot of public speaking techniques of what I do. And that's just a word of advice. YouTube and podcasting is an excellent ground for public speaking.
Yeah. Let's touch on that, because I agree with you completely that I run multiple podcasts, multiple YouTube channels. I create a lot of videos, and I think it has done wonders for my public speaking and my confidence. How did you feel like starting your podcast, and how has your confidence and your skill grown over time from running your podcast?
Both YouTube and my podcast. I was doing a lot of ums, a lot of, just ums and ahs and long pauses. It happens. And from there, I just developed, I became a lot more comfortable in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
It just happens where and from episode 1, actually the 4 unofficial episodes, and then episode 1. Episode 1 was much better than the 4 unofficials because I got comfortable and I began to understand my ground and my territory. And so you evolve. And then even from episode 1 to episode 20, the style changed where I became a lot more loose as a public speaker, where I have my set of questions, which is nice, and notes help. And in public speaking, you should always have notes. No matter what you do, notes are very important because they help.
Yeah.
And so my entire public speaking has just evolved to be more of a conversation. And I think that is the ultimate public speaking technique, is when you start evolving from being a very boxed in speech to being more conversational and being more engaging, because that is what people connect to.
Yeah, and I think as you do it more, you develop your skill and your natural confidence
without a doubt.
Public speaking, and then you kind of change in the way you approach it. Like I remember when I first started public speaking or first started doing videos, it was like you said, it was a very boxed in speech sort of thing, and you're so focused on just delivering your speech that you're not aware of the room, or you're not aware of your body language or anything like that. But then as you do it more and more, and you get more confident in speaking, you can start to focus on other things and to become even better. So you can focus on, like you said, being more conversational, being more like yourself. I think it's so much better. And I'm looking at your YouTube channel now, and I can see that you do a lot of reviews of comics and things like that, just where you're sitting right now and just talking to the camera. And I would encourage anyone out there, find something you're interested in. And if you want to get good at public speaking, do the same approach. Just talk about a topic that you're interested in to the camera, and just create these YouTube episodes or podcast episodes. And you'll find that you just naturally get better at it over time, and that it moves across to other forms of speaking. Have you found that doing the podcast interviews, doing the YouTube channel, that has made you a better panelist as well?
I just started my podcast, so I feel that YouTube really helped. I know for a fact that YouTube actually helped, because YouTube really gave me a lot of feedback, and YouTube basically evolves you. And so it gave me just a massive amount, because before this, I ran another channel where I had another 500 videos. So I've done about 1,200 videos and in the last 4 years. And that's a lot. I mean, even if you're speaking for 3 minutes at a time, just the amount of speaking time that I've logged in. And I would imagine that, I think you would agree that as we said probably multiple times, is that the more you speak, the better you get. And so I've logged in a considerable amount of time between my panels and just naturally just speaking. And there was a lot of do-overs with my videos as well. So we're not even counting that. But I've realized where I went wrong on YouTube, and I realized where I went wrong with my panels. And then you start figuring out, because if you're going wrong at the same place, it's going to appear in multiple YouTube videos, and you're going to get called out on it.
Yeah.
And that helps. That helps. Somebody calling you out is not bad. And people don't do YouTube videos. People don't do podcasts because they think that that's bad. I want people to call me out on my podcast, or say you made a mistake here, or you did this wrong. And even they can do it nicely, but if somebody does that, it makes me a better speaker, because then I can fix it. And it's another set of eyes looking at it, and the world's looking at it because it's out there. Yeah. And so that really helped me become better as a panelist, as well as just speaking in general, because you just have eyes on you. And you have eyes on you from sitting at a desk, which sounds bizarre, but it helps you get more comfortable with an audience when you have a global audience.
Absolutely. Definitely. And I think, well, like taking a long-term approach, as you were saying, when someone does criticize you or gives you feedback, taking that on board and saying, okay, let's take this on board. Let's not focus on the moment and how sad or angry this is making me feel. Let me focus on, I want to be speaking for 10, 20, 30 years to come. Let's take this feedback now and let's make it better for the next 20 or 30 years, rather than getting focused on exactly what someone's saying now and getting upset about it. So I think that's a really good approach. And then as well, you're saying just logging in those hours and getting better by doing it is one of the best ways, I think, to get better. And so by choosing something you enjoy, like you love anime, so you're talking about that, you love comics, or talking about all of that sort of stuff, you're going to get the hours in if you're talking about something that you love. But if you're just trying to, I don't know, write a speech about something you're not passionate about, I think you'll give up earlier and you won't put in enough time. And I think it really is the time and the practice public speaking that makes you better. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, actors have to act. They have to rehearse. Public speakers, you have to public speak. I mean, it sounds so simple, yet it's not viewed that way.
Yeah.
You have to speak in any format, speaking on YouTube, speaking on a podcast. Even if you have a small role on a podcast, where there are podcasts where they have a weekly update about sports, and it's 3 minutes. If you can get that and you only want to speak for 3 minutes, but you're doing that for 5 weeks in a row, by week 1 to week 5, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. There's no doubt, because you're even that small amount of 3 minutes, you're logging in time, and you will improve. It might be slight, but you're going to improve.
Definitely. All right. Well, I think we'll call it there. This has been a great interview. It's been great to learn about you, learning about running panels. I think people should be encouraged that if running panels is something they want to do, it's not that hard. You can, put forward your fan submissions and you can get a panel, and, it might be rough the first time, but if you stick with it and keep improving, then you can continue to do more and more. So I just want to thank you so much for your time sharing your information with my audience. I want to encourage everyone to go and check you out at popanimecomics.com, or go to YouTube and just search Pop Anime Comics and you should come up. And are there any last words of encouragement that you want to give to the Public Speaking Power audience before we sign off?
Yeah, you go get out there. Just go and do it and get off the stick, because dive in. It's the best way how to learn, and just do it. And it sounds simple, but just do it, run with it, and don't quit.